Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. JDF calls on senior member to resign following investigation into sexual harassment claims. More concerns over pre-charge bail on the proposed new Bail Act. And later in sports, Clarendon College celebrates 6th Oliver Shield win. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Masters and here are the details. The Jamaica Defense Force says it has concluded the investigation into allegations of sexual harassment by a senior officer with the recommendation for his resignation. In a media release today, the JDF said the probe, which started in October, found that the officer breached its Sexual Harassment Prevention Policy 2018 and the Personal Relationships and Fraternization Policy. It says due to the breach of policy, the Defense Board has called for the resignation of the officer, which will result in the termination of all benefits post-service. The JDF says all victims have since been advised of their right to make official reports to the Jamaica Constabulary Force. The JDF is imploring service members and civilians who are aware of the breach of any policy to use the approved processes to report them. The senior officer was recalled from training overseas following multiple complaints of sexual misconduct against him. The Independent Jamaica Council for Human Rights has indicated that it is not in support of the proposed pre-charge bail outlined in the new Bail Act. The council listed potential conflicts with the Charter of Rights and even worsening the backlog of court cases. With a backlog of cases in the courts, there's concern that with the government seeking to have pre-charge bail matters be adjudicated by the courts, they will add to the burden. Former public defender and member of the Independent Jamaica Council for Human Rights, Arlene Harrison Henry, raised the issue while speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106 on Thursday.
The question that ultimately has to be answered is whether or not this scheme that is being proposed fits within the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms.
Mrs. Harrison Henry says under the Charter of Rights is the use of arrest and detention of an individual and then bringing them before the court on reasonable suspicion of committing a crime. But under the proposed new Bail Act, that's not so.
With this notion of taking you in custody, putting you on bail, putting you on bail for what? What it is you have done? Why am I to be so restrained? You don't have anything to charge me, but I'm going to go on bail and I'm to be called according to the clauses under this proposed act. I'm referred to as a defendant and I'm not yet charged, but I am pitted against an adversarial system of justice, which means that I have to now go and get a lawyer. The police, if they offer me bail, are able to impose conditions.
It's why she says the council will not be in support of the proposed new Bail Act.
A pre-charge bail is a departure from human rights norms. You have imposed somewhat of a penalty on me without having, you don't even have the material on which to charge me.
Railroaded? That question from Port Maria Mayor Richard Query after receiving a letter from the National Security Ministry declaring a portion of state-owned lands for the construction of a new police station. The matter was raised at the latest monthly municipal corporation meeting just over a month after the mayor said the National Security Minister and other stakeholders had agreed on subdividing the lands in question. Krista Campbell has more in this TVJ News update.
The clock is ticking on finding a new station to house the Port Maria Police in St. Mary a month after raw sewage forced them out of the current building they occupy along with several other state agencies. But after identifying a new site following a tour with the Police High Command in November, Port Maria Mayor Richard Query is taking issue with a letter from the National Security Ministry about the lands in question.
It is not a situation where the Ministry of National Security is going to just come, acquire 2 acres, and that's the end of the matter. If that is the situation, super sorry for you, but I am not going to agree with that.
He says he will speak to the minister about the matter, but wants the municipal corporation's CEO to make the local authorities' position clear on the site in question, especially in light of their discussions during last month's tour.
This is the land that the hospital and the infirmary is housed on. So both entities would have some interest in the property. Over the years, everybody knows it is, and everybody will tell you it is parish council land. What I discussed with them at that moment when they visited was for us to do a survey of the entire property. In doing that survey, we would do basically a subdivision of the property.
In fact, he said the process had already started before the minister's tour in November and that it was part of plans to expand the town of Port Maria.
So we were looking at doing commercial lots in that area for lease or sale. The health department has an interest in putting their health center on that parcel of land as well.
He says he's surprised at the ministry's letter given the minister's own plans for the proposed site.
The health department would be there, the police headquarters. He even suggested the municipal corporation could probably get a new building in that area and move and free up this area in the town for other commercial activities.
Krista Campbell, TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The Medical Officer of Health for St. Mary, Dr. Tamara Henry, is urging citizens to take responsibility for their health as respiratory illnesses are on the rise. Speaking at the recent municipal meeting, Dr. Henry informed the citizens of the most recent illness called respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. Now, this is a common respiratory virus that usually causes mild cold-like symptoms. The symptoms of this virus vary among different age groups, but has similar signs to that of the COVID-19 virus. According to Dr. Henry, babies who are born before 29 weeks, people 65 years and older, and those with chronic lung diseases are more susceptible to contracting the virus.
Now, persons normally start showing signs, but there are some people who will start to shed the virus even before they start showing any signs. So between about 1 to 2 days before, they will start to shed and they don't have any symptoms. And these symptoms can last up to 8 days, 3 to 8 days. And for all of this, they're shedding the virus, right? The incubation period is 4 to 6 days. That means you're exposed and you don't start to have anything until about 4 to 6 days after. That's when persons start to have issues.
Dr. Henry says there is no specific treatment for the condition. Therefore, citizens must ensure they are taking care of their health.
Abroad, about 10% of the adults that get infected with RSV actually die. Those that are hospitalized actually die. So it's a very high mortality rate. So we want persons to look out for it. Once you're admitted, about 10% of them are going to die.
And since RSV can remain on surfaces for up to 6 hours, Dr. Henry is advocating for frequent hand washing and encourages citizens to avoid close contact with persons who are ill. Meanwhile, over in St. Anne, Dr. Tamika Henry is warning parents about viruses circulating in the atmosphere. Now, she says, as a result, parents and guardians should make every effort to keep their child or children inside as much as possible. She says the warning is particularly for parents who have children who were born prematurely or have children under 2 years who are unable to wear a mask.
Is that if you don't have to take those babies out, do not take them out with you because they're going to be exposed to a lot of things that are circulating in the air. Persons go out and they come back home and the babies are there. Everybody wants to run and take up the baby and do all kinds of things with the baby. Please remember to wash the hands before you touch or engage with the children. Persons who want to come to the house and they want to take up the baby and they want to kissy and all of those things, not at this time of the year when we have viruses circulating.
Dr. Henry says the flu vaccine is also available at health centers where the COVID vaccines are administered in the parish. Children from as young as 6 months, as well as other vulnerable groups, are being encouraged to take the vaccine.
These are the priority groups that we're looking at. We're looking at our healthcare workers. We're looking at our non-healthcare frontline workers like our police and our JDF. We're looking at persons who are institutionalized, so those in our penal institutions, pregnant women, whatever gravity they are, first to third trimester. We're looking at persons with chronic diseases or children with chronic conditions like sickle cell disease and so on. And we're also looking at adults who are 65 years and older with chronic diseases.
Effective today, travelers can board direct flights from the Bradley International Airport in Hartford, Connecticut to the Sankster International Airport in Montego Bay, St. James. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says Spirit Airlines will now do trips between the locations at least 4 times per week. According to Mr. Bartlett, the move is important because Hartford, Connecticut has the 3rd largest population of Jamaicans in the United States.
Spirit from Bradley is interesting for us because Bradley is Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut. And Hartford is the home of, I think, the first real set of diaspora, Jamaican diaspora. It's a city that has really grown in importance for not just Jamaican, but the Caribbean diaspora in general. But there's a very strong Jamaican, and they have been clamoring for a flight of their own, because normally they drive to New York or to Newark to get a flight to Jamaica. Now they have their own.
And it's now time for the Business Minute. Here's Cody and Barrett.
In the world of business, Chief Executive Officer of National Baking Company Gary Butch Hendrickson says the government is not effectively managing the procedures governing the agricultural industry. Speaking at a recent event, Mr. Hendrickson said there isn't enough accountability governing data management in the sector.
You can't even go to the minister and say, listen, what is your forecast for pineapple, the pineapple crop next year? Well, we encourage the farmers to plant. The ministry should have something that you individually go to them and say, you are taking off, I want 2 tons. Because you can't hold them to it, but we have to start somewhere as a nation. Now, if that doesn't work, and the farmers grow it, and you have an overage of 1,000 tons, for example, process it. That is where the further processing will go.
In business overseas, the U.S. Central Bank has hiked interest rates again and warned more increases will be needed to rein in the rapid pace of price increases. Forecast from the Federal Reserve showed the bank's key interest rate could stand above 5% a year from now. But policymakers are moving more cautiously, following signs that the most severe inflation in decades may be beginning to ease. They agree to lift the bank's key interest rate by 0.5 percentage points. That pushed the target range for the Fed's benchmark rate to between 4.25% and 4.5%, the highest rate in 15 years. That's it for the Business Minute. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
Now for a look at some of the top regional and international stories.
In the region, the High Court in Barbados has struck out colonial-era laws that criminalize gay sex. The previous laws, which rarely invoked, demanded a life sentence for those found guilty of having consensual same-sex relations. Barbados is the 3rd Caribbean nation to make similar reforms this year. Activists and members of the LGBTQ+ community who have fought for the change welcomed this week's ruling, saying it prompted privacy and freedom. In international news, British nurses are walking out of hospitals and onto picket lines in a historic strike as pay and staffing crisis threaten the National Health Service (NHS). As many as 100,000 nurses of the Royal College of Nursing (RCN), the UK's largest nursing union, are expected to take industrial action. The strike is taking place over 2 days, Thursday and next Tuesday. It marks one of the most dramatic uses of industrial action in the 74-year history of the NHS and will be the largest strike in the RCN's 106-year history. The RCN is calling for a pay increase of 5% above retail inflation and for the government to fill a record number of staff vacancies that it argues is jeopardizing patient safety. But UK Health Secretary Steve Barclay said in a statement earlier this week that their demand is not affordable. And those were your top regional and international stories. I'm Cody Ann Barrett.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Renardo Brown will have your midday sports report.